Hello everyone, this is our group project for FIPT 104 building construction at Miramar College. We decided to do our project on the Bailey's Crossroad Skyline Tower collapse. An overview of this incident is the Skyline Plaza was a large complex located in Bailey's Crossroads, Virginia. It included 8 apartment buildings, 6 office buildings, a hotel, and a shopping center. In the middle of construction on March 2nd, 1973, the apartment building A4 and the parking garage that adjoined it collapsed. It occurred at around 2:30 in the afternoon and resulted in the death of 14 construction workers and the injury of 34 others. 3 days following the collapse, on March 5th, 1973, the Center for Building Technology of the National Bureau of Standards was called upon to investigate the collapse of the plaza and determine the cause to be structural failure. A element analysis was conducted on the 22nd and 23rd floors to determine the magnitude of forces exerted on the floor slabs and whether the slabs could have properly handled those forces. Some facts about this incident are it occurred in Fairfax County, Virginia. It happened on March 2nd, 1973, with the apartment building A4 and the parking garage connected to it. Occurred around 2:30 in the afternoon and unfortunately resulted in the death of 14 construction workers and the injury of 34 other people. The collapse of the building occurred while shoring was being removed from freshly poured concrete between the 22nd and 23rd floors of the building. 45 lawsuits have been filed over 3.5 years. The estimated property damage was $12.5 million, and in total, the apartment building was $24 million. Concrete subcontractor Miller and Long was fined $300 for failing to use adequate shoring beneath newly poured concrete floors, as well as federal officials charged Miller and Long $13,000 for violations of worker safety codes. Fairfax County barred the resumption of the construction at the site for 16 months following the accident, but permission was regranted later, and the work resumed in July 1974, and the plaza was completed in 1977. Some of the key contributing structural factors that led to the collapse of the Skyline Plaza were floor-to-floor forces versus the supportability, construction and building code malpractice, multiple applied forces on one floor and the concrete strength, shoring malpractices, and possible crane involvement. Floor-to-floor supportability. The size and strength of the concrete differed with respect to the height of the structure. The compressive strength of the normal weight concrete was to be 34.5 MPa, about 5,000 psi for the columns. From the foundation to the 7th floor, it was 27.6 MPa, about 4,000 psi. From the 7th floor to the 17th floor, about 20.7 MPa, 3,000 psi, and from the 17th floor to the top of the structure was about 20.7 MPa, 3,000 psi. And the floor slabs that were used were sand lightweight concrete with a compressive strength of 20.7 MPa at 3,000 psi. This is a sketch of the estimated location of the forms and the reshores at the time of collapse. When you're looking at the sketch, you can see that the dotted lines indicate nothing had been poured yet. The X's through the squares indicate the formwork in place, and if it was dotted, the formwork was being stripped or was in the progress of being stripped. And there was also the date the concrete was poured for each slab, and it would show any reshoring if there was any. Construction and building code malpractice. Crews were averaging 1 floor per week, but near the time of the collapse, the rate of the work was doubled, which led to concrete being poured on the 24th floor, and the slab on the 23rd floor was only 4 days old instead of 7 days old, which they had been previously doing. According to OSHA regulations, forms are required to be in place for a minimum of 10 days with temperatures greater than 50 degrees for spans longer than 20. The violation for this was areas on the 22nd story had spans greater than 20, but forms on that level were removed before the 10 days at 50 degrees Fahrenheit. According to OSHA regulations, concrete specimens are to be tested in order to confirm the concrete has obtained the required strength to handle the loading that was placed upon it. The violation for this is no specimens were tested at all. According to OSHA regulations, shoring is only permitted to be out of plumb by 1/8 per 3 feet. All damaged or weakened shoring must be removed and replaced. The violation for this was shoring on the 23rd and 24th floors exceeded this limitation, and they were also not removed. According to OSHA regulations, an inspection is required before, during, and after the placement of concrete. The violation here is no inspection was ever completed. And the last one, according to OSHA regulations, the distance between the top and bottom supports of the crane shall not exceed 18. Standard tower sections used shall not exceed 4 as recommended by the manufacturer. The violation in this is both cranes had a distance of 18.4 between the top and bottom supports. Crane 2 used 5 tower sections, causing it to exceed the height limitation of 81 feet. This is just another overview about what the plaza was originally going to be used for. The construction of the Skyline Plaza commenced in the early 70s, and it was set to repurpose the airport that stood at that location. Plans had been finalized by the end of the 1960s, and the airport was to be sold to the Smith Company, who quickly revealed their plans of constructing a gigantic $200 million office, retail, and residential complex. Ironically, the airport was at first deemed a danger to the public, but it had never experienced a deadly incident. The entire complex was situated at Bailey's Crossroads in Fairfax County, Virginia, and was designed to feature 8 apartment buildings and parking for up to 11,000 cars. The project picked up the name Skyline Center, and all things ran smoothly until March 2nd, 1973, when the plaza collapsed, and the incident unfortunately took the lives of 14 construction workers and injuring dozens more. Multiple applied forces / strength of concrete. Both shear and bending forces were analyzed and considered to have contributed to the collapse of the building. Starting with the 23rd floor, due to malpractice of construction and not following the engineer's structural requirements, excessive and unaccounted for loads, both dead and live, and both shear and bending forces without reinforcing beam placement ultimately caused the failure of the 23rd floor slab. Shear forces cause one part of the structure to move in a different direction of another portion of the structure, and because of the previously mentioned premature removal of the shores below the 23rd floor, excessive shear forces were applied to that floor. The concrete of which was taking on these shear forces within the 23rd floor was also constructed of a weaker, more affordable sand lightweight concrete, which according to the ACI code of 1971 had a 15% lower shear strength in comparison to conventional concrete. Due to the differences in ambient temperatures between concrete cylinder laboratory test and the true temperature of the building location, the prediction of concrete strength was misinterpreted, contributing to the weaker, undermatured concrete floors in colder weather than what was lab tested. This is a graph of the concrete strength, the testing temperatures versus the actual temperatures during the construction. And you can see the differences between the two on this graph. This is a summary of the shear stresses applied on the 23rd story slab where the collapse occurred. You can see the PSI differences between the columns. This is another graph of the trends of the concrete strength under the curing temperatures for how long it's supposed to sit for. You can see the differences noted in this graph here. This is the strength test on test days versus the day of collapse. The last contributing factor was thought that maybe the crane was involved in this collapse, but after investigation, it was concluded the crane did not have any involvement of the initial collapse. The crane was in compliance with safe distance from construction and did not malfunction before the collapse. However, once the collapse initiated, the crane's involvement did cause further destruction and is a potential suspect for the garage includement of the collapse. Some of the fatalities included those construction workers that were located in the garage during the time of the collapse. These are some educational aspects. This is from the article, Another Look at the Collapse of the Skyline Plaza. And some of the things that were wrong with the U.S. construction industry. Field implementation of a design depends on construction quality control, and the degree of care and inspection can vary from project to project. Constructing a building in a short amount of time can be very dangerous, and the EOR should provide the contractor with all the necessary project information. Frame weakness. Premature removal of forms was a contributing factor to the collapse of the Skyline towers. And construction workers were not following OSHA guidelines and pouring slabs much faster than they should have been. The following slides are going to be some photos of the collapse. You can see that it was right down the middle. This is a picture of fire and rescue crews doing what they can to help those that were injured during this collapse. This is another close-up picture of the collapse. This is what the Skyline Plaza looks like as of today. And these are the references that we use for our project. Thank you for watching.